This story takes place in 1950, after the Korean War. It begins with a father and his son walking toward the bushes. The father's name is Woo Ryong, and his son is Young Nam. Woo Ryong is limping because he has a problem with his legs. As night falls, heavy rain starts pouring, and both father and son take shelter in a small, abandoned house. From their conversation, we learn that Young Nam has tuberculosis, a disease that affects the lungs. They are traveling to a place called Seoul for Young Nam's treatment. Along the way, Young Nam says, "Dad, I'm not a good son. My eyes are bad, my lungs are bad, and even my tooth is bad." His father asks, "What happened to your tooth, son?" Young Nam replies, "It's loose." Woo Ryong then says, "I'll remove it tomorrow." That night, Woo Ryong plays a pipe, filling the air with a beautiful flute melody, and they both fall asleep peacefully. The next morning, they arrive at a village. As soon as the villagers see them, everyone hides in fear. However, the village chief greets them and invites them to his house. On the way, Woo Ryong overhears the villagers talking to the chief about a growing threat in the area. The chief says, "We'll drive them out of here as soon as possible." Who or what this threat is will be revealed later. The chief offers food to Woo Ryong and his son. During their conversation, Woo Ryong shares that his wife was killed during the war, and because of his leg injury, he was unable to protect her. Woo Ryong then explains that he is traveling to Seoul for his son's treatment. He tells the chief that a doctor promised to treat his son if they reached Seoul within a month. Woo Ryong even shows the chief a letter with the doctor's address in Seoul. However, the text on the letter is written in English, and neither Woo Ryong nor the chief can read it. As the viewers are shown the paper, it becomes clear that instead of a proper address, it humorously says, "Kiss my ass off, monkey." This phrase, "kiss my ass off, monkey," is clearly an insult or disrespect. From this, it becomes evident that no one is actually waiting for them in Seoul. Woo Ryong then requests the chief to allow his son to stay in the village for just one night. The chief agrees, but under one condition. Woo Ryong must not tell anyone in the village that the Korean War is over. Woo Ryong accepts the condition. Meanwhile, a woman named Mi Suk-ho is frying eggs, but something unusual happens. One of the yolks, the yellow part of the egg, turns red. All the villagers gather around, surprised and curious about how the yolk could turn red. The chief then arrives and declares, "This is the new shaman of our village." The villagers cheer and celebrate, welcoming their new shaman. That night, the celebration begins. During the festivities, Woo Ryong introduces his son Young Nam to the chief and the villagers. Woo Ryong and his son are revealed to be war refugees, people who fled their country during the war. The villagers gather around and ask Woo Ryong questions about the outside world. They want to know if the war is over, whether the president is alive, or if he has been killed. Accidentally, Woo Ryong reveals the truth that the war is over. However, the chief quickly interrupts and lies, saying the communists have killed both the president and the general. He insists that the war is still ongoing. The villagers then start discussing their struggles, including a growing problem with food shortages. Woo Ryong asks, "Why? What's happening?" and learns that their village is overrun by rats. These rats are so numerous and aggressive that even humans are scared of them. Woo Ryong steps forward and says, "Just give me one chance and I'll take care of everything." At first, everyone laughs at him, doubting his abilities. To prove his claim, Woo Ryong plays his pipe, creating a sound so powerful that birds and animals begin to move and leave their hiding places. He confidently declares, "My pipe's music is strong enough that animals obey me." Everyone agrees to give Woo Ryong a chance. Even the village chief promises him, "If you can drive all the rats out of the village, I'll pay you the price of a cow." Woo Ryong responds gratefully, "Thank you so much. This will help me pay for my son's treatment, but I'll also need the price of a pig." The next morning, a villager comes to talk to Woo Ryong, and during their conversation, Woo Ryong mentions, "I can also make medicines using plants." The story continues as Woo Ryong begins inspecting the village to understand the rat problem. Meanwhile, Young Nam spends time with the shaman, Mi Suk. Young Nam sees a resemblance to his late mother in Mi Suk and feels a sense of comfort around her. The scene ends there. Later, Woo Ryong returns from his inspection and finds himself feeling somewhat drawn to Mi Suk. It is then shown that he helps repair the leaking roof of Misuk's house. Afterward, during the evening meal, called Rock, Woo-ryong eats with his son and the village chief. During the meal, Woo-ryong notices something strange. Nam-suk, the chief's son, is feeding fresh meat to the rats. Surprised, Woo-ryong asks, "Why are you giving meat to the rats?" In response, the chief begins to recount a story from the past. He explains that during a time of communist threat, the village was about to be attacked. The chief and most of the villagers fled to safety. However, a group of lepers and an old shaman refused to leave, despite repeated warnings. After the danger had passed, the chief returned to the village with his people. But to their horror, they found everyone who had stayed behind was dead. Woo-ryong suggests the communists must have killed them. But the chief shakes his head and says, "No, the communists never came here. This was the work of the rats." It becomes clear that the villagers now feed the rats meat to prevent them from attacking and eating the villagers alive. Now you might be wondering, who are these lepers? Well, lepers are ordinary people like you and me, but they suffer from leprosy, also known as Hansen's disease. Lepers, due to their condition, appear somewhat zombie-like. Their pain receptors and nerve pathways are completely numb, making them less aware of pain or sensation. The next morning, Woo-ryong and his son, young Nam, set up handcrafted windmills all over the village. They realize that the unique feature of this village is the wind that blows constantly through it. Woo-ryong comes up with a plan. He will use plants to create 2 types of powder, which he will spread across the entire village ground. Then, he will light a fire and mix the powder with the smoke. The smoke will spread throughout the village. Woo-ryong explains, the rats will be drawn to the smell of this powder. As they eat the powder from the ground, they'll become trapped in a cave. Once they're inside, we can seal the entrance with a big stone. However, it takes a long time for the rats to emerge. At that moment, Misuk, the shaman, arrives and begins ringing a bell, praying to the gods for help. Soon, the rats begin to come out more quickly, following the scent of the powder. They move toward the cave, just as Woo-ryong had planned. Woo-ryong runs alongside them, guiding them toward the trap. Woo-ryong rushes to close the cave entrance with a stone, but his leg injury slows him down, and he can't keep up with the fast-moving rats. Have you ever felt that way? If he doesn't close the cave in time, the whole plan will fail. But just as hope seems lost, Woo-ryong's son, young Nam, appears and steps in to help. With a wooden slab in his hand, young Nam stands in the path of the rats, slowing them down. This gives Woo-ryong enough time to catch up. Together, father and son manage to push a large stone and seal the rats inside the cave. When they return to the village, everyone celebrates their success. The villagers praise them, saying, "You've done a great job." That evening, a celebration is held, with everyone eating, drinking, and enjoying the moment. After the festivities die down and the villagers leave, Misuk and Woo-ryong have a quiet conversation. It's clear that they are becoming more and more drawn to each other. Both Min-suk and Woo-ryong had lost their spouses during the war, which is why they feel a deep connection. As Min-suk notices the chief approaching, she quickly says goodbye to Woo-ryong and leaves. Before she goes, Woo-ryong gives her a hairpin as a gift, a token of his affection. It's clear that Min-suk and Woo-ryong have grown very close, and the chief notices this. Later that night, the chief goes to Min-suk and warns her, "Don't even think about leaving the village with that piper. If you do, you'll face severe punishment." The chief's anger is fierce and he beats Min-suk harshly. A flashback scene then reveals the truth. Remember when the chief told Woo-ryong that the shaman and the leper had been killed by rats? That story was completely false. In reality, the chief and the villagers fled because they feared the communists were coming, not because of the rats. Despite the chief's fears, the communists never attacked the village. When they return, the remaining lepers and shamans tell the chief and his people, "You left this village, not us." After much pleading, the lepers and shamans allow the chief and his group to re-enter the village. But soon, the true nature of the chief is revealed. In a cruel move, the chief and his people force the lepers, including the shaman, into a cave and lock them inside. There, the rats begin to attack and eat the lepers. However, the shaman manages to escape and curses the entire village. She prophesies, You will all die one night when there is no moon and no sun. Your children will witness your deaths, and then they will be locked in the cave to die as well." Despite the chilling curse, the chief and the others dismiss it as nonsense. They burn the shaman alive, believing her words hold no power. One more thing to note, the chief had always wanted to become the village shaman himself. After the original shaman's death, the terrifying rat infestation began to spread throughout the village. After the new shaman's arrival, it seems that the rats might finally be driven away. The story now moves to the present, showing two parallel events. First, the chief meets with all the villagers and starts turning them against the piper. He tells them, "The piper didn't drive the rats away, it was our shaman who did it." The chief manipulates the villagers, brainwashing them to believe his version of the events. Meanwhile, the piper is with the shaman, and he tells her, "Come with me. We'll live together, and my son will receive his mother's love." The shaman, fearful, agrees. The piper then says, "I'll bring my living money." The shaman responds, though her words are not yet clear. The piper tries to convince the shaman, saying, "Don't leave. We can work hard in soul and earn money again." But despite his refusal, the piper goes to ask the chief for money. The chief insults him in front of all the villagers, saying, "You didn't drive away the rats. Our shaman did everything." He accuses the piper of being a spy, using the letter the piper had shown him as supposed evidence. The chief exclaims, "Look, this is a spy's secret message." In front of everyone, the chief's son cuts off one of the piper's fingers. Then the villagers call the piper's son a thief and beat him severely. Both the father and son watch helplessly from a distance. Finally, the chief snatches the piper's pipe and orders them both to leave the village. But before they can go, the piper is stabbed in the stomach by a knife. As she dies, she repeats the old shaman's curse. "All the children of this village will die." The scene then shows Wu Riong sitting under a tree in poor condition with his son by his side. Young Nam takes a rice ball from his bag which the chief had packed for him. He thinks to himself, "I'll go get Dad's flute." His father is asleep, so he quietly sneaks out to the chief's house and retrieves the flute. However, on his way back, young Nam grows hungry and eats the rice ball. The moment he eats it, he starts vomiting blood and screams in pain before collapsing and dying. It turns out that the chief had packed 2 rice balls, both laced with poison, intending to kill both father and son. Suddenly, Wu Riong wakes up and looks around for his son. After a long search, he finds his son's lifeless body. When he sees the rice ball, he understands the chief's plan. Furious and heartbroken, Wu Riong vows to take action as soon as he gets the money he needs. In his grief and rage, Wu Riong goes and burns his son's body. He then uses his pipe to spread the same powder smoke, calling out to the rats. He commands them to help him, saying, "Eat my body together." The rats, drawn to the sound of the pipe, begin to feast on the villagers, devouring them alive. Everyone in the village is killed. The chief, in a panic, tries to flee but sees Wu Riong approaching, with the rats following him. Wu Riong looks at the chief and says, "Now it's even." The rats, obeying the sound of Wu Riong's pipe, swarm and consume the chief. The chief screams in agony as the rats overtake him, and the scene ends. The next morning, the children wake up and notice that their parents are gone. They become extremely worried and frightened. The children then hear the sound of Wu Riong's pipe, and they follow the sound, heading toward the cave. All the children reach inside the cave, and they see that there is no one there. And Boryong from the outside closes it with a stone. All the children scream from the pain, and they die there. Then Boryong shows his face towards the camera, and the film ends there.